Look at this.
Nice
job.
1, 2, 3. Steve, are you good? Okay, we're on. And go ahead.
Okay. Okay, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the City Commission meeting for August 16th, 2017. We will convene the regular meeting. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Ide,
Here.
Commissioner Mengelberg,
Here.
Commissioner O'Donnell is absent this evening, Mayor Holliday is absent this evening, and President Shaw.
Here. Thank you. Join me in the flag salute, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, ceremonies, proclamations, and presentations. First thing we have here is a proclamation for the 97th Oregon City West Linn Rivalry Day. Our football program has been going on that long, and I'm going to read a proclamation for that event. Bear with us while we're using some new technology this evening here. Whereas the cities of Oregon City and West Linn wish to recognize the efforts of their citizens to create and maintain a positive family environment where children can learn the value of constructive competition, and whereas the cities of Oregon City and West Linn value tradition and history as essential parts of their communities, and whereas Oregon City High School and West Linn High School, formerly known as Union High School, have competed valiantly in the sport of football continuously since 1921. And whereas on September 1st, 2017, the teams representing these schools will renew their annual rivalry for the 97th time. And whereas this is the longest continuously played rivalry west of the Mississippi, therefore worthy of recognition, and whereas the City Commission of Oregon City desires that the Pioneers again defeat the Lions, and the City Council of West Linn desires that the Lions again defeat the Pioneers. Now, therefore, we, the City Commission of Oregon City, and the City Council of West Linn hereby recognize and commend all citizens who have participated in this annual Gridiron Classic and support the events of the current teams by proclaiming September 1st, 2017 to be Oregon City West Linn Rivalry Day. We further recommend, in the spirit of the day, that all citizens wear clothing of the appropriate colors and refrain from crossing the river unless business requires until game time. Thank you. All right, next item. Tourism Strategic Plan, Scope of Work presentation by the Correggio Group. Might have pronounced that wrong.
Correggio.
Mr. Underwood, please.
Thank you, Commissioner Shaw. As you are well aware, we have begun our efforts to establish a tourism strategy, a citywide tourism strategy. It's just at the beginning stages, but we thought this would be a good opportunity for you to meet the consulting team and talk about, they're wanting to give you a presentation and talk a little bit about themselves, introduce themselves, and then talk about the project, the scope of work, and a potential a timeline for that scope of work. So I'd like to introduce Matthew Landkammer, Bo Bennett, and Colin Stetzel. Matthew is the principal of the consulting team, and his focus in this project is strategic planning advisory, marketing and brand strategy, market firm selection and oversight. Bo is the project manager and associate principal of the firm, and he's concentrating on project management, stakeholder outreach, strategic planning, operational planning, and implementation assistance. And Colin is the senior business analyst, and he will be focusing on the stakeholder outreach, strategic planning, financial strategy, marketing and branding strategy, operational and planning and implementation assistance. So with that, I'll just go ahead and turn it over to them and have them present.
All right, thank you, Eric. Thank you for having us here. We're really excited to be starting this project up. It's great to be doing some tourism work right in our backyard. Coraggio is a Portland-based. This clicker's not working here. There we go. Now it's working. Portland-based consulting firm. We're 12 years old, relatively small firm, but we focus mainly on strategic planning. That's probably 2/3, 3/4 of our work is strategic plans or strategic plan-related work. In that, the biggest sector that we work in, the sector we work the most in, is travel and tourism. So this is a specialty for our firm. This is well within our wheelhouse, and it's exciting when we get to do this so close to Portland. As you can see from the slide up there, we work all over the West doing this work. Those are our travel and tourism clients, select clients up there. And so what we bring to this project is all the experience we've gleaned from working with all these different destination marketing organizations over the years. I'm going to give you a quick overview of how we think about strategic planning and what our framework is, and then Bo's going to take you through the process a little bit. We divide a strategic plan into 3 main parts. You can see down the left: strategic clarity, strategic focus, and strategic action. The clarity is the 30,000-foot stuff, the big picture, the vision, the mission. There's a couple of things in there that may not be familiar from other strategic plans. Reputation. In this case, what is the reputation of Oregon City as a tourist destination? And position, which is a sort of way for you to understand how you stack up against some of the competition. This isn't a detailed analysis, but it's an understanding of your place in the tourism ecosystem that you compete in. Those pieces together form our North Star for the plan. They're supported by strategic focus. The strategic imperatives are those big categories of things that must be done over this planning horizon. And measurable objectives are how we'll know when we're making progress. So those will be, we'll be really careful to design measurable objectives that can hold everybody who's working on this accountable to the same goals. Everybody's focused on making the same numbers move, and that's what makes these things work. And then the initiatives are those specific actions that will be taken to support those strategic imperatives and to move the needle on those measurable objectives. So it's a pretty simple, straightforward framework. We found that breaking it into those 3 parts really helps everybody sort of grasp the different functions of the parts. In addition to this strategic planning piece, we're also doing some marketing planning, and we'll talk about that as we go through the process a little bit too. So this is sort of a bit of a 2-pronged process where we're doing a strategy for tourism, but we're also doing a marketing piece and bringing a marketing agency on board. I'm going to hand it over to Bo to talk about process.
All right. I'll take this one. Thanks. So we also like dividing our processes into 3 steps. It's a nice, easy way of doing things. Using kind of the same general buckets: get clear, get focused, get moving. Just an easy way to kind of segment the work into phases and make sure that we're kind of tracking and everyone's tracking where we are. So we've already begun the get clear phase of our work. We always start our projects with an immersion session where we sit down with, in this case, Eric and Leanne and some other stakeholders and try to get just a download of what's going on, what has happened in the past, who some of the stakeholders are, what some of the current issues are, just so we can kind of get up to speed on what's happening. We also conducted a stakeholder visioning retreat last week where we pulled together about 30 tourism and kind of community stakeholders to get some kind of high-level guidance for the strategic plan, asking about things about needs, kind of visitor profile, and generally just the long-term vision of Oregon City as a tourism destination. We also implemented a stakeholder survey earlier in the month, ran for 3 or 4 weeks, and got a bunch of good response there. So our goal early on in the Get Clear phase is to get a lot of good public input, or a lot of input from lots of different stakeholders, because as we move into kind of the Get Focused and the more targeted strategic planning work, it's really difficult to do with a large group like that. So we want to get a lot of good feedback, and then we narrow it down to a smaller planning team that is representative of those various stakeholder groups, that can kind of speak for them and can check back in with those groups. So back to the process. Public meetings, we've got 4 planned. This is one. Hi. So the idea behind these is as we go through and develop the plan, we're kind of checking in on where we are, making sure we're checking back in with stakeholders so they're not only putting input once at the beginning of the process, but that we're checking in back with them and using their input to adjust. We're also doing some tourism economic impact analysis. We're working with an economist that specializes in tourism in Oregon. And so we're looking at what the impact of tourism is and can be to Oregon City, and how that impact can fund potentially some tourism promotion related activities. And we don't know what those are yet, but that's part of the strategic planning process. And we roll all that together in what we call an insight report. So this is something that we're working on now, bringing together what we learned in the immersion session, the stakeholder visioning session, the survey, and it's really just bringing up kind of what are the key things we learned through all this process. And we bring that to really all of our planning meetings to make sure that the planning team is well informed, and this is something we can check back against. In this case, also kind of as a part of that insight report is the other tourism plan that you all are probably familiar with, this guy that was developed, it looks like about 2 years ago. So there's a lot of good work that's gone into this. There's a lot of good stuff. And so we don't want to set this aside and start from scratch. And so it's part of our plan to, as we go through our strategic planning sessions and checking in with the planning team, is that we're referencing back to that, making sure we're building on the work and pulling out things that are important and that need to be carried forward. That was a long time talking about Get Clear. Get Focused is where we do most of the work. So we've got really 5 or 6 total strategic planning sessions. We have a couple focused on strategic clarity. So those are the kind of higher level, big picture portions of the plan. 2 more sessions where we're thinking about what are the initiatives and the imperatives that we really need to drive forward in order to achieve that vision. And then objectives. So we spend an entire session thinking about how are we going to measure success? How are we going to know that we're moving the needle and we're progressing the way we need to progress on this plan? I'm going to skip over the marketing things, let Matthew talk about that, and then at that point we're going to check back in, make sure that we're reaching back out to stakeholders, and then doing any revisions based on additional feedback. And then we'll develop a final strategic plan document that can be used as kind of a tool as we go through the work of implementing the plan. We believe very strongly that the worst kind of strategic plan is a plan that just sits on a shelf. So we try and make our plans compact and readable and actionable. And that kind of leads into the get moving phase, where we've got some time set aside to do some financial strategy. So this is tying the economic analysis back with some of the initiatives that we've identified, and say how can we financially make this kind of thing happen? What is the strategy to implement some of these things, and how are we going to fund some of these activities? And then, since there is no real formal tourism organization in the city right now, our plan is to work and with the implementation and oversight of some of the initial strategic initiatives to make sure that there's a process and kind of clear responsibility so that the plan doesn't just stumble. I mean, that's sad. We start this thing with the vision of making sure that this is something that is implementable. That's why we try and get broad stakeholder engagement, so we have lots of buy-in and a lot of people who can move the plan forward. And so we want to make sure and support you in getting that going. So this is just kind of a Gantt chart of all those activities I just talked through. Where we started in June, here we are in August. We're really kicking off our strategic clarity workshops. Next week we've got one planned, and we'll be working on that kind of get focused phase through November, and then into December, January, and potentially beyond, working on the implementation. I feel like I've been going on for a long time, but I'm going to let Matthew briefly talk about the marketing component.
Thanks, Bo. So as I mentioned, there's a concurrent marketing piece that's going on. So you can see the target market identification and brand strategy workshops sort of start to happen right in the midst of strategic planning. And we're working within a timeline, so we're trying to get these things done simultaneously instead of sequentially. What we're going to do there is put some stakes in the ground and say, these are the people we're going to go after. These are the people we want to have visit Oregon City. Who are they? Where are they from? What are they interested in? The brand strategy workshop will build off some of what was done at the visioning summit that we held, and also the survey, any input we got from that, and work that's done in the strategic planning, strategic clarity portion of that plan will also feed into the sort of brand strategy. What do we want to position Oregon City as? How do we want to speak about the opportunity to visit here? Those things then will form the basis for us to have some marketing strategy workshops and start to flesh out how are we going to promote the city. Is that what proportion of that is going to be online? Are there other means we need to use? We'll use that as a way to then form a brief, essentially, to solicit marketing agencies and choose a marketing agency. So we're going to assist Eric and Leanne in choosing a marketing agency, and then we're going to spend some time working with them and doing some implementation assistance just based on our background and expertise in marketing. So that's going to be going on in parallel to the strategic plan so that they sort of land at the same time.
So we thought, as Bo said, we have gotten a little work done in the Get Clear phase, specifically like Matthew just mentioned with regards to the Visioning Summit we had 2 weeks ago and the survey which just recently closed. So just giving you guys a brief overview of some of the things we've come across so far. So first, the stakeholder survey ran from July 20th to about August 14th. We got some pretty good response with 139 people answering. Question categories were designed to provide insight into the two lanes that we're going to work with, the marketing strategy lane and then the actual strategic planning lane. Those things cover brand reputation, tourism assets identification, target geographic regions, target itinerary lengths, target demographics, tourism support roles, and opportunities and barriers that are facing Oregon City as they think about tourism as an industry. We also asked a bunch of these questions in the Visioning Summit, and I'll touch on that in a little bit. But the interesting thing is the respondents, we got, most of the response were citizens, which is actually really good because it's very rare that we hear from that broad of a stakeholder from a citizen base. We tend to get businesses, and you can see city officials, attraction owners. So it's a good thing to hear from the people who are going to be a part of that tourism industry because your citizens are a part of your tourism industry. Moving forward, so real quick, some initial visitor profile that came from the survey. You can see today that a lot of the stakeholders believe Oregon City is a 4-hour to 8-hour day trip itinerary. And as we move towards 2022, that shifts to longer stays. So more of an 8-hour overnight trip to weekend adventure type thing. Similarly to the demographic of the travelers, right now, people feel it leans towards families and retirees, and that over the next 5 years, that's going to shift down a little bit to couples and families. So just some initial responses we're getting from the survey. Some of the things that we identified were opportunities and barriers. So what are some opportunities facing Oregon City when we think about tourism? The Willamette Falls, it's historic downtown. It's in Oregon, which is really popular at the moment. Your river, and you have a legacy and the historic nature of Oregon City. The barriers to successful tourism industry have been identified as a lack of parking, a lack of lodging. Portland being a hot area right now is how do you compete with something so close? And some other things, trying to think, attractions, options for people to come and visit. So this is a brief overview of what we did at the Visioning Summit. We broke everyone up into groups and we gave them these 4 quadrant pieces to work through. The first quadrant was visitor profile, getting another opinion on the things we just kind of talked about. And what we found out was that they're pretty in line, that you're going to be sourcing from a geographic region in the Pacific Northwest, families, couples, retirees, and road trippers. We then asked about tourism criteria. So if we're going to promote tourism, what are the criteria that the assets have to have? They need to be authentic, they need to be accessible, and they need to be connected across the town to create momentum in tourism. We also asked propelling questions, and this propelling question is stating a problem and coming up with outside the box solutions to it instead of just saying we can't. And one thing that a lot of people rallied around was how can we connect tourism assets when we are not coordinated as an industry? The last thing we did was we talked about long-term needs of the city. As we think about tourism in Oregon City, what do we need from the city to drive that? And the big thing was marketing, which we're doing in this project, brand awareness, who is Oregon City as a tourism destination, and then asset development and political support were the main ones that came out. Now, the survey, once we dig into it a little deeper, we'll see how that compares, and some of these might change as we get more of a population set, but right now, this is what we're hearing. So that was a brief overview, and I believe we're opening up to questions.
Yes. With that, we'll take your questions.
All right, Commissioner Mengelberg.
So just a couple of thoughts. I really welcome the focus on narrowing down the brand and the marketing, but as part of a larger strategy, we're also going to have to think about how do we enhance what we have, and I tend to call that infrastructure. Like, do we need an online reservation system? Do we need a tourism office, one place for a tourist to go? Do we need some way for people to get around, whether it's signage or a shuttle system, which we've had before, and maybe aggregate demand makes it more timely in the future, I don't know. But how do we enhance that tourism experience for everybody? And part of that connection is also connecting the tourism attractions. People need to know each other. They need to cross-promote each other, and they need to understand what each offers so that they can be guiding people around. What else? And training, hospitality training is huge. People need to have a good experience to want to come back and to tell their friends and relatives and people to come visit. So,
Right.
and tourism is a really big subject, and there's lots of different things to think about, but those are some of the fundamentals to think about as well, in addition to marketing, which is, you have to have something to market to be successful.
Yes, you do. So I appreciate all of those things that you brought up, and I think those are probably all candidates for things that will show up in the initiatives. You know, I do want to be clear, though, we're not going to solve everything in the strategic plan, but what we will decide is what things are we going to prioritize working on. So you brought up the example of a shuttle or some sort of transportation. So in the strategic planning process, the team may decide that's a priority, and that's something that we need to form a task force, say. I'm just making this up, but maybe we need to form a task force to determine what the best path forward is for that, but we know we need to do something. And so the strategic plan will give us those priorities. There may still be some work to do to figure out the nitty-gritty, but at least you'll know what to put the energy towards, right? And I absolutely agree with your last point, too. People talk about Hawaii with the aloha spirit. You know, people in Hawaii know that tourism is a big part of their economy, and they treat visitors accordingly. Building that sort of understanding in your population, especially in the service sector, is really, really key.
And I just want to add, I mean, I think it's a good point that all those things are important, and part of the challenge, and one of the things that we're here to do is, you know, help the team and help you make this decision of what do we prioritize first, because you can't do all of that stuff at once. Right? You don't have the time or the budget, and so how do we stage these things in a way that thoughtfully kind of builds on each other and create a good plan that so you end up at the right place.
Commissioner Wright?
So here in Oregon City, you probably are aware that we have like some silos of tourism already taking place, and they're successful. They're doing a good job in a particular area. So is part of the planning process going to be to connect with those tourism, the tourism that's currently happening, and integrating that into the master plan, so to speak?
I'm going to take that one.
Or having that discussion regarding?
Yeah, so I think part of the key is going to be making sure that those voices are included in the process.
Yes.
Whether it's as representatives on the strategic planning team or in these public meetings that we're doing and making sure we're drawing those in. I know some of those folks were at the Visioning Summit, and we'll need to continue to keep them involved. So the short answer is yes. We need to make sure that all of the existing sort of tourism sectors that you have are well connected and working well together. And some things may be, even within those silos, may need some alignment. For instance, all the heritage things may need to have similar hours and make it easier for people to take that in as one big package and not be scattershot, maybe promote together, that sort of thing. So even within those silos, I think there may be some direction towards alignment, but we'll just have to see what comes out in the process.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Anything you want to add? Okay, well said.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Underwood? Or?
No, we're just excited that this is going.
All right. Well, thanks so much, folks, for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
And, we look forward to your end product here. Will we be getting updates as we go along here?
Yes, you'll be getting updates periodically, certainly.
All right. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is pavement maintenance utility fee and pavement condition index update. Mr. Lewis, please.
Thank you, Commissioners, for taking the time to listen to us talk about pavement maintenance. It's one of the most interesting topics you could ever ask for, and we're here to present it well. So most of you know Martin Montalvo. He's our Public Works Department's operations manager, and he oversees the day-to-day operations of our water, sewer, stormwater, and street departments. And this presentation is focused pretty squarely on the street department and some of the accomplishments in that department, and the overall kind of evaluation of our pavement. We've got a lot of pavement to manage, and so he'll give you some of the facts on that. But we do a pavement evaluation pretty regularly, usually every 3 years. This one's got a little longer gap. We did it 4 years ago, and we use a consultant that evaluates that. It's been the same consultant for many, many years, and they come in and they do a visual survey of our pavements, and this year they're bringing pretty good news. We've started, the pavement maintenance program's been around since, it started in 2007, but we've really been doing work since 2008. And it's been a lot of years of catching up. We haven't necessarily seen the benefits of that in a increase in what we call pavement condition index, which is a measure of the quality of the pavement that we have. So this is a first for us, and really Martin's going to present the details of that, but we're pretty excited about it. It's not necessarily all good news, but it's pretty good news. So with that, Martin.
Okay. So Martin Montalvo, Operations Manager, Public Works. So the first thing we do is give credit where credit's due. So Matt Pallison, who's our Streets Division Supervisor, runs the pavement management program. He was going to be here this evening, but he had a conflict. He's really, since being promoted to the supervisor position 2 years ago, has shepherded this program and taken it to where we believe it is today. The department as a whole has supported this program for several years now, and we're here to bring you some of the good news that we got with the most recent report. So a little background. We've got about 130 miles of centerline roads within the city. There are arterials, collectors, and residential streets. We have an annual budget of about $2.5 million, but what we can actually use of that funds for construction is in the neighborhood of about 1.8. The rest of it's consumed with preventative maintenance work, engineering cost. We've got a huge uptick recently in terms of trying to meet ADA compliance. Every time we do road improvements, we've got to maintain that ADA compliance. So that eats into a little bit of that funding model. So there's two primary forms of work that we conduct. Preventative maintenance, which you see every summer. The biggest thing you'll see is actually crack sealing. That's our cheapest and most effective means of pavement maintenance, and that's in the ballpark of a couple bucks square yard for doing that service within the city. The big thing that people see in their residential areas is slurry sealing. It puts a nice seal on the pavement, keeps water from penetrating in there, and keeps us at that higher PCI level. And then some chip seals is another thing that we do periodically. We've actually going to be doing our chip seal this Friday for the 2 roads we're doing this summer. Average cost for all of those in the neighborhood of $1.40, and that's actually a typo to $5 a square yard. So it's a good cost benefit if we can keep the majority of our work in this price range. It allows us to avoid a lot more of the costly and prohibitive rehab and reconstruction work. So when we start doing rehab and reconstruction work, the costs climb significantly. So a cubic or a square yard of work for milling and paving is anywhere in the neighborhood of $23 to $32 is what we've been seeing in the last 4 years in terms of bid pricing. And then if we have to do really extensive work where you see us ripping out the entire road and doing cement treated base or a full depth reconstruction, that'll run anywhere between $52 to $80 is what we're running on those costs. So the preventative maintenance side, we get a much bigger bang for our buck if we can try and tackle it in an approach where you're not waiting for it to collapse before you start servicing it. So the big change with pavement management over the last few decades now has been treat your best first rather than your worst first. It allows us to keep this curve where you see on the side, you've got time on the x-axis and condition on the y. If you can do incremental preventative maintenance treatments in the life of that asphalt before it gets too far on the condition side where it's lowered, you actually wind up saving cost overall. What it actually winds up doing is, if you notice on this curve, by doing all the preventative maintenance, you extend the actual life of the road, so you don't have to get into the much more costly pavement reconstruction. So how is the process done? So there's a lot of stuff up here, but primarily it's a process that was developed by the Army Corps of Engineers a couple decades ago. It's moved into the private sector. There's a formulaic self-evaluation that we have certified individuals come out and they basically do visual observations on representative samples of our transportation system. And from that, they have a score sheet that they can calculate for the overall system. So the scoring goes on a scale of 0 to 100, with 100 being obviously the best. So it was determined that...
You skipped a slide.
Skipped a slide, yep. This little touch, this is not good.
It's very touchy. Oh, maybe.
So the good news that we're going to tell you today is, so 4 years ago when we did this last, the PCI score for the city was 68. So 68 gets you in the fair category. This evaluation, so we've got a PCI index of 76. So we've climbed 8 points, which is pretty significant for a 4-year interval. It places us on the lower end of the good scale. One of the last slides you'll see is how we compare against other communities of our size and where that puts us in relation to them. The other thing that we want to kind of tout is that within the last 4 years alone, we've been able to treat over 1/5 of the overall transportation system with some form of treatment, or whether it's preventative maintenance or some reconstructive work. That puts us in a good cycle to basically be able to touch almost every portion of this city within a 10 to 20 year lifespan. All right, so the second part of the study was taking a look at funding and what the projections need to be to either sustain your existing PCI index, so stay at that 76, increase it to an optimal 82, and then there's the pie in the sky scenario that if you had all the money in the world and you could do it all at one time, how much would that cost? So that's the initial step within the study. So if we had all the money in the world and we wanted to get ourselves to a optimal 82, it would run us about $21.6 million. Okay, that's obviously both fiscally and logistically impossible to try and accomplish. We couldn't do it all in one summer. So then you take a look at what your average funding right now, and what will that get you in an additional 4 years if you sustain your existing funding model? So as I said, we have about 1.8 million that's actually put in the ground each of the years. At a 1.8 million funding model, moving to the next 4 years, or the next 5-year cycle, it's actually projecting a small decrease in the PCI. So we'll go from a 76 down to a projected 74. Still be in the good category, but we won't be as good as it is right now. So what does it cost to possibly sustain a 76 PCI index? So that means we need to go to a funding model of about 11 million across the 5-year interval. Is that what we're asking? No, that's not one of the recommendations from the study, and it's not something that John or I are asking for you guys. We feel that the funding we have right now, we've got good momentum and we're able to keep up with the work that's needed, but we're not requesting any increase or change in the PMUF funding schedule. And then the last scenario is, what would it cost to have a significant increase of up to additional 5 points on your existing PCI? So those are all just the 4 scenarios that we kind of run through the system to try and keep track of everything. So again, this kind of gives you an outline of what each of these funding scenarios cost and where we're kind of targeting. So right now we're staying with the current investment, which is the 8 million annual, with a projection of in the next 5 years possibly decreasing 2 points in PCI.
It's not 8 million annually. It's over the 5
Yeah,
years.
across the 5 years. Okay, so this very complicated graph, kind of walk you through it. So on the left-hand side, you have deferred maintenance in millions of dollars. On the right-hand side, you had PCI. So let's talk about the deferred maintenance. So each of these color bars represents one of the 4 funding models that I just referenced. So there's all the money you had in the world. You don't see any of the gold bars in the bar diagram, because if you had all of the money in the world, you would have 0 deferred maintenance. Okay? And then you'd have this optimal PCI that you see up there at 82 on the right-hand side. So the current funding model, you'll see that the deferred maintenance across the 5 years slightly increases. So at the beginning of the 5-year projection, we'll have less than $8 million in deferred maintenance that needs to be completed. Under the current funding model, at the end of that 5-year period, we'll have about $14 million in deferred maintenance. Okay? The second scenario, maintain the PCI, calls for a slight increase in the fee. We would still be having an increase in deferred maintenance across the 5-year period. We'd maintain the same PCI, but the increase in deferred maintenance would not be as significant as in the current funding model. And then the increase 5 points, that shows a slight decrease in deferred maintenance over the 5-year period, but it also shows you increasing your PCI. So we have to try and find the sweet spot of what we can try and achieve with the funding that we have right now. So how does this relate to, excuse me, how does this relate to the actual road conditions? So right now, the current condition, over 74% of the roads within Oregon City are considered to be in good condition, okay? So that's the highest rating that you can get under the Army Corps of Engineers system, is a good condition. 10.6% are considered in the fair condition, 12.6% in the poor, and then we've got a little 2% over in the very poor. So looking at each of these various funding models, using the unconstrained, you have 0 in the very poor, and 94% of the roads would be in the good condition. Under the current funding model, again, because we're increasing deferred maintenance, we'd have a 9.5% under the very poor and 83% under the good condition. And then you can see how the scenario kind of expands through the different funding scenarios. So all of this is great. All of this is very informative. I'm sure the question you're asking is, how do we stand in relation to other communities of our respective size and population? So for a community with 130 miles of center line, and the current PCI is 76, right now we're at the 90th percentile for communities of our size and population. within the data set that use this program. Okay, so that's the thing you need to take into relation here. So this is derived from all the users of the software suite that we use and all the clients of our firm that does the capital assets that does the assessment for us. So in relation to all of those other parties who are sharing this data communally, we're in the 90th percentile, which is very good. And I will tell you that the data set is actually quite large. So PCIs for similar communities of our size is expected to be somewhere in the 70 or 64 range. So we're sitting at the 76. That puts us on the very far right-hand side of that bell curve. So I think we're doing a good job. I think we've got sufficient funding to continue doing good work. And with greater innovation and good project management, I think we'll be able to sustain the existing PCI that we have now. With that, I will turn it over to John. If you have any questions, feel free.
I have some questions.
Yeah.
One is our pavement management fee. Is that adjusted for inflation or is it a flat rate?
That one there is adjusted now. We've reached the top, so it's adjusted for inflation. So I think it's, I want to say it's 3% a year.
3%?
Yeah.
And then on your projections of how much revenue you might have over a 4 or 5 year period, do you also adjust for increase in population, since the funding comes from a utility fee and we're a growing community? In theory, we would have more money.
That I don't know the answer for. I can tell you that the funding model that you see here, we made some deductions. For some of you, it may look like that gets a little low. We made some deductions in this 5-year funding scenario because we know that we have some major capital projects coming along, Malala Avenue being one of them, which PMUF is going to have to help contribute to. So that's money that won't be contributed into the pavement maintenance utility fee program. So the funding is seems a little bit low because of those particular projects that we know that are coming. In terms of adjustments for population increases, it's something I'd have to defer over to Wyatt or to John.
Well, so the adjustment isn't necessarily made based on population. We obviously, those are new ratepayers who would pay. So we see those revenues change from year to year. You know, I think we average about 200 new residences per year. So it would be, you know, that times our rate times 12, right? So we see those, but so I'm not sure about the adjustment piece. What were you asking there in terms of?
I'm just thinking that you may have more money to invest in this program as the community grows and also grows denser, as we're looking at accessory dwelling units and more ways to provide more affordable housing. You might have more people paying utility bills to help fund the program to make more of a dent in the backlog of construction that's needed and do more maintenance.
Right, I would agree with that because, you know, if you think about a piece of frontage, if you take ownership of that frontage essentially, or know that your fee contributes to that, obviously the more dense the property. If the densities don't get more per acre, then we end up with more roadway, yeah, more users, but we also end up with more kind of liability. So I think it's the density piece is where yeah, you're right. The more people we have in a smaller street segment, the more it is to share that expense with.
And then one final question. We had a pretty tough winter. Did we lose ground with all the potholes and the damage that we had with the...
It didn't help, whether we lost ground. So this basically takes a look at the delta between 4 years ago and current. I can't tell you that if we had done this a year ago, before this rough winter, that we might have come back with a PCI of 78. But I can tell you it didn't help. But we've done a pretty good job of tackling a lot of the damage that we had from this last winter. Most of the potholes, which I'm sure several of you got emails about, those were addressed as timely as we could get to them. And then several roads were shifted around in terms of some of the maintenance work that needed to be done for them as a result of just the impacts we had from the last winter. So our crack sealing program has been going gangbusters since the beginning of the spring, trying to deal with just the impacts from the last winter.
Thank you.
Okay.
One little piece that is kind of interesting is the two roads that we're chip sealing this year. We're actually using a recycled rubber coated rock, something we haven't tried. It's pretty big in the East Coast, and they've brought that process out to the West Coast. So Holmes Lane and Clackamas River Drive, we're going to be chip sealing, which is something that we've done pretty regularly. But this year it's going to have rock that's coated in recycled
Old
rubber.
rubber tires. Yep.
So we'll see how that goes.
Okay.
All right.
Commissioner Hyde, anything? Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, John. So we're going to move to citizen comments here. Anybody would like to speak to something that is not on the agenda this evening?
And there is one, William Gifford.
Mr. Gifford, please.
I think just hit it twice. Mr. President and members of the City Commission, my name is William Gifford, and I live in Oregon City. A couple of brief things. First, the strategic visioning retreat that the tourism folks talked about was just really top rate. I know that Commissioner Ide was there. I heard comments saying that that was the best visioning retreat that some folks had ever been to. It was really top notch, and I think we are on the right track. Regarding the PMUF, I just wanted to comment that I think that that is possibly one of the most successful fee programs that this city has ever instituted. When I hear from other citizens about what great shape our streets are in, and it's because of that. And it was well planned out and well done. I do need to point out that that fee is likely to be an unending fee. We are always going to be having deteriorating streets, so we just need to remember that we will always need to pay for that. However, there's another fee that we pay, the C-SAFE, the Community Safety Advanced Funding. That's going to go away. And the way that that's going to go away is we have a bond measure coming up this September 19th. It's not unique, but it's rare that we have a September special election, September 19th. It's the only item on the ballot, so we are concerned that some voters might not think it's important, but it is important. It cannot raise taxes, and when it only allows the city to sell bonds so that we can build a new police and municipal courts facility on property that we already own. It's a win-win situation, and I certainly hope that it's going to be more successful than it was last time we tried this. People didn't quite understand. It is designed to explicitly state that taxes cannot be raised. I don't know that it goes specifically enough to say that the fee will go away, however, once the bonds are paid off, and I think that's a big selling point. I want to mention that. And to that end, I'd like to also mention that the ballots are going to be going out on that. They'll be mailed out August 30th. They'll begin mailing the ballots August 30th. So please vote early and often. August 22nd, the Oregon City Business Alliance is going to be having its annual educational forum, and the topic of that is called Schools and Police. We are having joint presentations, one by I'm sorry, I don't remember his title, the facilities director, Wes Rogers of the school district, and his architect is going to be talking about the Oregon City School District Facilities Master Plan. It's a big deal, and the community needs to understand what's on the agenda for the schools. And our own Police Chief Jim Band is also going to be speaking on Measure 3-517. He's only going to be presenting facts. He will not be able to advocate for the measure. I might be having a little hand in that, but I do want the people that are watching on TV to be aware that September 17th, Measure 3-517 will allow us to get rid of the C-SAFE once the bonds are paid off, and please vote yes. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gifford. All right, so we're at the adoption of the agenda here, and I would like to recommend to my fellow commissioners that we move item 7B up to our first item, as we do have members of the county here tonight, and we can get them in here first. So how does that grab you? Do we need a motion for that at all? Okay, we good? Okay. All right, so this is 17-469, resolution number 1722, declaring an emergency and exempting Clackamas County modular tiny home assembly from planning code requirements and processes on a temporary basis. Ms. Tearaway.
Thank you. Laura Tearaway, Community Development Director for the city. Next time I'll work on a shorter title. That one's a bit of a mouthful. So we're here because Clackamas County would like to work on some temporary housing for houseless veterans. And in order to do that, they have received a couple of trusses, 700 to be exact, from a Pickathon event. They deconstructed a stage from the Pickathon, and from that, they would like to construct modular homes. Oh, sorry, that skipped a little bit. They'd like to construct modular homes.
Oh, I lost her now.
Oh, here we go. The modular homes consists of a lot of trusses. There's 7 trusses on the roof, 7 trusses on one side, and 7 trusses on the other. So 21 trusses per modular home. The Clackamas County would like to construct these modular homes at their campus at Red Soils on the hilltop. And so what has happened is that they have fenced the area, and that picture's a little bit dated. They've started to bring in some of these materials, including the trusses and some cargo containers. And prior to doing any of that work, they were supposed to have come to the planning division to get a prior approval, and that didn't occur. This case and how it's set up is a little bit problematic because there are a couple of things that they're doing that are not allowed by code. You can assemble tiny homes in the zoning designation, but we're running into a couple of problems with some things that they're doing. One is outdoor storage, which we don't allow in the zoning designation. 2 is the construction of chain link fences, and 3 is the use of cargo containers. So the county has proposed to utilize this site. As you can see, it was already fenced. It is on their campus. It currently consists of a gravel parking lot, and they intend to construct 30 tiny homes between now and October 31st, at which point the tiny homes will be relocated to a different county-owned site outside of Oregon City, near 115th and Jennifer or so. And so staff has proposed a resolution which exempts them from planning requirements. So they would not have to meet the planning requirements which prohibit those things of outdoor storage and fencing and cargo containers. And this is something we don't do lightly. The only reason why we're proposing this resolution today, and we hope to never be talking about resolutions to exempt planning again, is because there are city commission goals to work with partners to identify housing opportunities, affordable housing, to look at the houseless community and identify housing. The other component of this is it's for a temporary time frame, since they'll be relocating everything off-site by October 31st. It is a limited duration. They've also indicated that they would return the site to pre-existing conditions, so it's a gravel lot now. It will return to a gravel lot. They'll just take all the materials and relocate. We do have some members from Clackamas County here to talk about it as well. Vahid Brown.
Good evening. If you could just your name and city of residence, please.
Sure. Richard Swift. I'm the Director of Health, Housing, and Human Services. City of Residence is Portland.
Okay.
Jeff Jorgensen, the Facilities Manager for Clackamas County and Gladstone, City of Residence.
Okay. All right. right, go ahead, thank you.
So you might as well.
Done?
Yeah. So I'm here mainly to answer questions. I'm not actually responsible directly for the site where they're going to be stored. That's more of Jeff's wheelhouse. So my responsibilities are actually eventually the relocation of the tiny houses, the pods, to our site off 115th. And then also, of course, the sustaining of the temporary housing of vets that we're attempting to do here for a period of about 2 years.
I'd like to thank Tony Conkle and Laura Turway to go ahead working with us to try to get this done. It is just a temporary site to go ahead and try to get that temporary housing for the homeless veterans. Again, just like Laura said, we're talking about October 31st, turn it back to the original site. Just a temporary process to go ahead and get those homes. And the homes are being manufactured by veterans, or excuse me, by volunteers. Volunteer groups that are coming in and trying to construct these. We're working with groups coming in just to go ahead and put those together. Very little support by the county itself, but we're just trying to provide the security and get those out, get them constructed, and then put them on trucks and move them to the site in Clackamas. And so if anybody has any other questions, but Laura's really been concise on that and correct, so.
Yeah.
Commissioner Hyde?
Yeah, thanks for coming tonight. I'm generally supportive of this project and eager to see the vets housed. I think somewhere in the staff report it talked about the materials were kind of suddenly being made available, and they had to get them to where they needed to go on your property rather quickly. And it isn't a matter of our not being supportive of the project, but more or less just respect for our code. So, that's just, being that, it looks like we may have more opportunities in the near future to be working with the county on similar type projects. We just, we don't want to have to be going to emergency or resolutions on a regular basis, but generally we're supportive of what you're trying to do, and hope that it doesn't have to be an emergency each time. And the only other question I have is, as far as just the plans for the vets, I'm just curious more than anything. I assume that there's some services and they have a case manager and so forth, so that it's just it's temporary housing for them at this point, but is it your goal to get them housed on a more permanent basis, and a plan for doing that?
Yes. So this project is essentially what we want to do. If this commission is familiar with the Kenton neighborhood tiny house project that's going up north in the city of Portland, that also is temporary. And what we're trying to do is essentially a proof of concept that you can do intentional organized community in a response to houselessness. What we see along the Springwater corridor is a lot of chaotic houselessness. It's camping. It's not organized. We're not bringing services into that. If we are able to, they're extremely transitional in our ability to maintain contact with folks, because part of the process of getting folks from a state of houselessness to housed is a case management that is occurring on a regular basis. And one of the things that happens when we are dealing with chaotic situations is people coming in and off our radar. They're there one day and then the next they're gone, and we don't know where they are, and we can lose contact with them for months at a time. And so our focus has been in working with vets organizations on veterans for this part of the process. And our sense here is that we are not, our intent is to not actually maintain this site off 115th for a long period of time. It's originally zoned industrial. We're acknowledging that. We're sensitive to that use of industrial land. And what we want to do is prove to the entire county, cities in the county, that this type of process can work, because it's a continuum of response to houselessness. We're seeing a fairly extreme economic events taking place here, where more and more people are being forced towards houselessness. They're not able to economically participate. We're extremely concerned about this, and we're kind of behind the 8 ball. So we're going to be working with Catholic Charities on bringing services to the vets living at this site, these structures, and I'm hoping that actually members of the commission will come on out to the Red Soils campus and take a look once we got a few of them up and running.
Pick up a hammer.
What's that?
I'll pick up a hammer.
Sure, if you want to come and bang some nails and put these together, we would absolutely welcome that. And I do apologize for the fact that this moved very fast. So Portland State had been working, through their architectural school with Pickathon, and it really just came to our attention very quickly that these trusses, as they were designed, were actually intended towards the use of these types of pods. And so this sort of just fell out of the sky into our lap. And so we just felt like we can't say no to this. And then, of course, they said, well, we're gonna be disassembling the stage on August, was it 9th? Something, I believe. 8th, yeah, 7th or 8th. And hey, we need to bring them around to some place and store them so they can be assembled into pods. And we got no place to you. And if you have a place, we need it now. And so that led to this, I think somewhat backwards process. And I do regret the fact that we did not abide by notification to the city in regards to, respect for your codes. We were quite sensitive to that, and I do regret that. And so I appreciate your consideration tonight and support of this. And, we're really looking forward to what this can be as a first attempt towards houselessness and in terms of response, the county's response and city's response to the partnership I'm hoping this is going to result in. And also the fact that, winter, this is going to sound like I'm advocating for Games of Thrones, but winter is coming, and we are really trying hard to bring resources to bear so that we do not wind up where we were last winter, which was, in a basically day-to-day, night-to-night emergency in trying to respond to people potentially freezing to death. By the time we were done with the winter, our staff, and I know that Oregon City participated with us, we were absolutely worn out. We were reaching everywhere because we had folks who were just absolutely exhausted, and I'm really trying hard not to go back there.
Commissioner Middlework, anything? Okay. Well, I think we're all in favor of the project, Richard. So it's, and I'm glad you recognize the code issues that we have here that we like to abide by. And as you've probably seen recently, the city's trying their best to create a rapport with the county here. Mm-hmm. And so when this kind of came up, that we understand the emergency of it, but also that hopefully in the future that we're going to be more cognizant of these kind of things. So we really want to have a better working relationship here. And so this does have a October 21st deadline, is that correct? That
31st. October 31st.
October 31st, okay. We'll be looking at that. So, all right. So anything else? Thank you, folks.
As a citizen comment.
Oh, okay.
William Gifford.
I did have one comment. I think that the location where this is going to be assembled now on the Red Soils campus, surrounded by county buildings and tucked away from view and from immediate proximity to residential houses, is a good location. It's not going to have too much impact except on your own surrounding buildings. So. It's a
correct.
Good
it is shielded from houses and that it's within the campus. You're correct.
Okay. Thank you, folks.
Sure. Thank you much.
We'll have, well, do they come up next, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And we have a citizen comment here, please. Mr. Gifford.
Mr. President, members of the City Commission, my name is William Gifford. I still live in Oregon City. I'm tickled silly about this project. I'm just over the moon. I think this is outstanding at a lot of levels. If if any of you went to Pickathon, and I hope that you did, or if you didn't, there's pictures of that stage. Do a Google search on Pickathon stage homeless pods, and you'll see some really amazing pictures. Fabulous idea that those trusses were made by volunteers. They're going to be assembled by volunteers. Catholic Charities putting all that together. The fact that we're going to be helping the homeless, that we're going to be helping veterans, these are all pluses. The fact that it happened all of a sudden is indeed unfortunate, but I know that the county came to the city and talked with them at length about making sure things were done properly, finally. And I was personally assured by the county administrator that they will do everything in their power to make sure that they are very aware of what our codes are for any future projects. But I just couldn't be more thrilled by this project. I think it's a brilliant scheme. It's a brilliant scheme. If they would have just known about it a little further in advance, that would have been nice. But I just want to say I heartily support this and the opportunity for us as a city to be participating in this. It's not going to cost us anything.
Yeah.
Except we'll get a little bit of credit for helping out. So carry on. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, William. Anyone else?
Nope.
Okay, we'll take a motion.
Okay, I will move to approve resolution number 17-22 to declare an emergency and exempt Clackamas County modular tiny home assembly from planning code requirements and processes on a temporary basis.
Second.
All right, moved by Commissioner Ide, seconded by Commissioner Mengelberg. Could you poll the board, please? Uh-oh, I have to get on here, don't I?
Commissioner Ide,
Aye.
Commissioner Mengelberg,
Aye.
and President Shaw,
Aye.
and it passes.
Okay. Suppose we have to get on to do this, or? Okay. All right, we're moving on to PC 17-019. Request for a city commission review of the Parker Knoll subdivision. Ms. Tearaway.
Thank you very much. This is another unique case that we probably won't see too often. The city received a subdivision application for an 11-lot subdivision called Parker Knoll. It's adjacent to Wesleyan Park, as shown on the screen. In the application, as you can see, part of the proposal includes improvements on Wesleyan Park site. We won't go into detail about what those improvements are. That's just important for the context. We know that our charter limits the use of parks, and if you do certain things in parks, it requires a vote of the people. But we also know that this, a similar subdivision, went before the vote of the people twice and was narrowly defeated. Since that time, we've received a subdivision application. And upon receiving the subdivision application, the applicants required us to deem it complete, even though as the property owner of the park, we did not sign the application. And so we had to process it. We have this legal burden to process applications in a specific way. So we did that. We did a public notice. When we notice the public, we do various methods for public notice, but we received a lot of public comment. And a majority of that public comment was relating to a question of if this proposal needs to go to a vote of the people. So it's all related back to the charter question. And so tonight I am asking, we'll go into a bit more detail, but the question before the commission is, will you review the subdivision application? We'll go into more detail, but normally we would review the subdivision application without a public hearing. And what we're proposing is, because this subdivision has an inherent question of if this needs to go a vote of the people or if it complies with the charter as is, it makes more sense to group those questions together. It's clear in our public comment that the public is a little bit unclear on what the role of the subdivision review is, as opposed to a separate question of the charter. So we kind of have our blinders on when we do subdivision review, and the charter question isn't necessarily related to a planning criteria, but it is still very relevant. And so if we package the two together, then we can provide better opportunities for public comment, more opportunities for public comment, and it could go to the commission, and the commission can answer the question of if it needs to go to a vote of the people. So today, I'm just asking if you will call it up. So rather than me make the decision on the subdivision, if you can make the decision on the subdivision. I recommend we don't take public testimony today regarding the issues of the subdivision or the charter or any of the details. I just want to talk about process. And behind me is a map of the process. So the top line is essentially what happened and what our standard subdivision process is. They forced us to deem an application complete. We did that, we noticed it. We mailed notices to neighbors, post signs on the property, put the application on our website, received lots of comment. The next step would normally be for us to make a decision. So it's a director decision approving the subdivision or not. If we proceed in that path, I would do a condition of approval that says amend the charter if you need to. And that charter question would really go unanswered because it's not necessarily an approval criteria and it's not appropriate for me to make that decision if the charter needs to be amended or not. It's a bit of a legal one, and so we have our team of lawyers to help us. What I like to do is to re-notice the application. Right now, the public comment period has come and gone. It's closed. So what I want to do is open it back up again. And the applicant also supports this proposal. And so we would open it back up, and in our public notice, we would advertise 2 meetings. We would advertise a city commission work session, and at the work session, we'll go through all the details of the charter. And it would just be solely focused on the charter. Then in the notice, we would also notice an application hearing, so a normal hearing that you guys are used to. And at that point, then the public can come and testify. It would be a de novo hearing, so anyone can come and talk about anything related to the application. As opposed to if I make a final city decision, that decision is done, someone may appeal it, and if they appeal it, the appeal is going to come to you, but your blinders are on because you're only answering the subdivision question. But really, for what we're understanding from these public comment is that people want to talk about the charter question too. The subdivision is actually really straightforward, right? You meet in the minimum lot size, lot width, lot depth. The more interesting question is if a charter amendment is needed. So this is very, very rare, but I am asking if you want to bring it up to a city commission level to volunteer an extra hearing and extra opportunities for public comment. The rationale for responding to this ask would be that it's cleaner because you can look at the subdivision, you can look at the charter, you could look at them together. It's less confusing for the public, and it's going to be less confusing for us as we review it. Also, we talked about reopening up the public comment period, allowing people to come and talk at a hearing, which they don't get to now. And if someone wants to appeal it to get to the city commission, they don't have to because it's already at the city commission. So you would lose that local appeal. Your decision, regardless, could still be appealed up through ranks through LUBA, Court of Appeals, and so forth. So they get to keep their appeal fee, whoever that person is. And then also, it's a more efficient opportunity to answer the charter question, because the process to answer the charter question is a little bit ambiguous. And so here we're doing a clear process that's noticed to the public to let them know that you are answering the charter question. And the charter question, again, is if it needs to go to a vote of the people. If you decide to take this up, then there's a couple dates behind me. We have already noticed the application. We are almost ready to go to renotice the application to have that work session in September and a hearing in October. so we can respond swiftly to the comments that we've received in the public. With that, the question is if you're willing to call up this subdivision application, and with that, you'll probably be getting into that charter question as well.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
One, is there absolutely no way that the property owner can make this work on their own property and not impinge on parkland? That would make all this go away.
This is a question that's beyond the scope of what we're talking about in this hearing. We can talk about that at the work session, but right now the question is, do you want to call it up? I don't really want to get into the substance of the charter and whether or not there's alternatives because the record's closed.
Oh.
Right now, the record is closed, and we can't open it because it's not before you to open. Right now, it is, right now where this sits is the comment period has opened and closed. A decision for the planning director to make that is then appealable to the city commission to have a hearing. That's how it sits right now.
So we don't want to give you more information unless you decide not to do this and then you receive it on appeal.
My second question is noticeably absent from your proposed approach is any involvement on the planning commission. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that's true. And I think the question here is a policy question about the charter. Planning Commission is very helpful in reviewing applications, but normally they don't even get involved in subdivisions because they're so easy. There's limited discretion, so there's not that amount of discretion that we would normally take things to them. Again, it's minimum lot size. Do they meet it? Yes, no. We talk about what kind of public improvements are needed and lot width and lot depth. It's relatively straightforward. And so this proposal would skip the Planning Commission because the reason why it's coming to you is because of a policy question related to the charter and not a land use question.
Well, the other thing to point out is this wouldn't go to the planning commission in any event. Okay. The type 2 process is the planning director makes a decision, it's appealable to the city commission. It wouldn't go, it's not going to go to the planning commission if you don't call it up.
It would die.
No, it won't die. It will go from Laura to you. It won't go to the planning commission.
Okay. But if we don't call it up, then Ms. Cherway makes a decision and they could appeal it and it would come to us.
It will come directly to you. It will not go to the planning commission.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a good question.
And I think also this is really an interpretation question of the Oregon City Charter, and that really is the role of the City Commission to interpret the charter as to what it means.
Okay.
And it's for that reason that I think we should call this up, and just to allow more public input on a very important subject that the voters have already spoken on, and then make a decision from the city commission level regarding the project.
Well, and I think that you can see from the, I don't mean to interrupt, but you can see from the chart that Ms. Turway put up that we're not deviating from the ordinary course much. The only part that we're deviating, the only area we're deviating is giving more process, right? We're giving another notice and we're going to have what we call a de novo hearing, means an open record and anybody can testify. If we don't call it up, only those people who submitted written comment so far can come and testify in the appeal hearing before you. So we think this is sort of a more appropriate approach, even though it is a little bit novel.
So we anticipate this being sort of a one-time deal, that you won't see this very often again, if at all, asking a call.
And just so you know, there is some precedent of other jurisdictions doing this, We worked with the city of Central, our office worked with the city of Central Point to call up a case where there was a 120-day problem. And in that case, we took it out of the hands of the Planning Commission and called it up to the city council, where the Planning Commission was supposed to make a decision. And LUBA affirmed that approach because the city council, city commission has intrinsic authority to make these review decisions,
So because I think it's more appropriate for the city commission to make that decision and relieve the community development director of that burden, I move to call up the Parker Knoll subdivision, file TP 17-02.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Ide, second by Commissioner Mengelberg. Poll the board, please.
Commissioner Ide?
Aye.
Commissioner Mengelberg?
Aye.
President Shaw?
Aye.
And it passes.
So I look forward to talking to you all about the merits of this, the work session.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry to
And again, there will be room for public testimony at the
Hearing.
which is after the work session.
Correct.
So on October 4th, public testimony will be taken then. Okay. Thank you. All right. We're moving on to the purchase and sale agreement for 1220 Main Street Municipal Parking Lot. Mr. Underwood.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Tonight, we are requesting that the City Commission consider authorizing the city manager to execute a purchase and sale agreement for a hotel development at 1220 Main Street. This project it will be producing 50 full-time jobs, new jobs. It has the potential of bringing in over $111,000 of transient room tax annually, as well as over $160,000 of property tax annually. Prior to this meeting, the commission has directed me to move forward in negotiating with the developer of the project and has made certain requirements to be incorporated into the agreement. And I'm happy to report that we have successfully negotiated all of those requirements in this agreement that you have before you tonight. And so I'll just hit on some of the highlights of those. Some of the highlights of the deal. Actually, we have agreed to credit the land value at closing to the developer of $920,000 for the property. There is an issue with relocating high voltage transmission lines in front of the property. We've negotiated that the seller and the buyer will split that cost evenly in doing that. We've negotiated that the buyer will provide the conduit and the pathway to underground the distribution wires across the street that would serve the property. They will be doing that at sole cost. There will be of course, the hotel development with a retail component that includes ground level retail with a lobby entrance. There will also be a parking component, a parking structure as part of this, to which we have reserved 90 public spaces that will be open to the public 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with a lease of $1 a year for 99 years for that. We would be responsible in maintaining and striping those parking spaces as we do now. So we're not losing any parking capacity. However, the developer will be charging for their parking, so we need to work with that developer to negotiate in good faith, a parking agreement, so we're not competing with parking there. So we do have it in, these are considered deed restrictions. We do have it in this agreement that if the developer doesn't comply or violates any of the deed restrictions, that we can enter the property again and take the property back and sell it at our discretion, regardless of where they are in the project. Also, there's a request from the commission to incorporate kind of a reimbursement clause, whereas if they were to develop the property, if they sold it within 5 years of completion of development, that they would need to reimburse the commission $325,000, which is the original purchase price of the property. So that basically covers it. They have 300 days to receive all of their approvals, land use approvals, and then once that's done and they close, they have 24 months to construct the project and complete the project. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, Commissioner Mingleberg's been writing over here.
No, I'm just excited to see that the negotiations were successful, and I think it'll be a great addition to our community, and preserving the parking in that part of town is important. So I think all in all, it's a really great opportunity for the city, and thank you for your good work on it.
Thank you. Mr. Wright?
Can you, for the public's information, can you talk about, is the parking going to be in the backside of the hotel building, up near the railroad area? Is that going to help to mitigate the noise? And
That's the intent, is to build a parking structure behind the hotel building, between the railroad and the hotel. So it will be a multi-level parking structure with reserved parking for the public use.
will there be any other mitigation as far as the developer's concerned for reducing noise for
that has not been mentioned at this point. We are pursuing a quiet zone mitigation at the crossing at 10th and Main for another development project, which is at 10th and Main. So that should eliminate horn noise, at least.
We got the Bowley thing worked out.
So we did. The concern earlier was whether or not the $920,000 credit for the property was considered public contribution, but it is not. The only element that is considered a public work is the parking facility, since they're making an improvement to public parking. So that is in the contract that they need to inquire with Bowley about what the rates would be, the prevailing rates for that part of the project.
Yeah. How many spaces are in the proposed parking structure?
There are 125 currently, and we would have 90 of those spaces.
Okay, that's where I was going. If long as we weren't imposing, or they would be imposing on us, if that there's 90. How many rooms in the hotel?
Right now, they're planning for 85. It says 100 in the report, but we've been negotiating for a while, and things change.
So if they were full, they would be.
They would need one space per room, but they can use on-street parking is their requirement.
All right. So. Just making sure we got our 99 there, Eric. So.
We got our 90 spaces. It wasn't easy, but
90 spaces.
Yes.
All right. Okay. That's all I got. I guess we need a.
Just also wanted to mention, you did receive, and we entered into the record, an email from Mr. Matheson. Oh, I'm sorry, wrong one. Yeah.
Move to approve 17-413 purchase and sale agreement to 1220 Main Street municipal parking lot.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Mingleberg and seconded by Commissioner Ide. Poll the board, please.
Commissioner Ide?
Aye.
Commissioner Mengelberg?
Aye.
President Shaw?
Aye.
And it passes.
Thank you, Mr. Underwood. Thank you. Great. Looking forward to that now. Okay. All right. We have a consent agenda in front of us. Any changes or additions, subtractions?
I think this is where I meant to speak up. Item 8A, amendment to the interim agreement for Rediscover the Falls. We forwarded and entered into the record an email from Mr. Matheson dated August 16th regarding the Rediscover the Falls nonprofit. So that information was provided to the commission. concerning the $50,000 as part of the intergovernmental agreement for the operations of the nonprofit group. That's identified in that IGA. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that and that it's in the record.
So we will take a motion for the consent agenda with the addition of the
Mr. Matheson email dated August 16th.
Okay.
Move to approve consent agenda with addition.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Mengelberg and second by Commissioner Ide. Can you poll the board, please?
Commissioner Ide.
Aye.
Commissioner Mengelberg.
Aye.
President Shaw.
Aye.
And it passes.
Thank you. All right. Communications, city manager, please.
I was just going to ask Library Director Cole to come give just a quick update on
Yes.
the eclipse on Monday.
So winter is coming and the eclipse is coming, in case you haven't heard. And so very importantly, people need to have specific solar eclipse lenses when they look at the sun. And we received 1,000 pairs of glasses from the Space Science Institute. It was a grant. And they are NASA approved, and they've got the right little emblem on it and everything else. We started passing them out today, 100 today, 100 for the next 4 days, and then 500 for the day of the eclipse. Although we might reduce that because that seems like an awful lot of people, and we really don't want 500 people here. That's like a lot. So anyway, today's lineup, we had them distributed in about 2 minutes. Everybody, and we opened the doors at 10. Everybody was in a very nice orderly line, thrilled to get there. 1 pair per person, no exceptions. And the reason we distributed them that way is because we had a bunch of kind of pushy, greedy people come in the last few weeks, demanding more of these free items. So anyway, I think the distribution will go really well. And then the other thing is that West Lynn Library sent out a little email saying, oh, by the way, the ones we had distributed got recalled from Amazon. So we did have a few concerned patrons, but ours are the perfectly approved kind. So there's the little symbol on the inside, which is great.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you, Mo.
Yeah, you bet.
Good. Thank you.
Then the only other update is that I'll be out of the office beginning Friday the 18th. I'll be returning on Monday the 28th. While I'm gone, Wyatt Parno will be the acting city manager. So, that concludes my updates tonight.
All right, Commissioner Ide.
Okay, I do have a few things tonight. So I'm the commission's appointee to the Downtown Oregon City Association, as you know. I just wanted to update you on a few things that's happening with the association. They had a very successful first city celebration in Brewfest. There were 8,000 wristbands that were distributed, and that's to both adults and children. So they had at least that many people there. We also had a very successful Oregon Trail 5K, 8K run, and the participants expressed enjoyment over reaching their pioneer-style milestones along the way. So it was a very endearing event. DOSA, Downtown Association, applied for the National Great American Main Street Award, and I just thought that was very exciting because, having had Jonathan received the Main Street Manager of the Year award, and so it would be just awesome if we could also, as a national award, get this. And I think we have a pretty good shot at it with the transformation that's taken place down there, as well as our future work in the Legacy Project and the rest of Oregon City. So that we'll know more about that in September, whether we got that or not. And the other important matter is that Oregon City is hosting the Oregon Main Street Annual Conference in October, early October, the 4th through the 6th, right here on Main Street. And it's an enormous opportunity for us to have right here in Oregon City, over 200 of them, movers and shakers in the state, to see our downtown, to visit our Main Street and the area, to encourage tourism. And the conference will support our own local businesses and event centers. And we've arranged some tours for them of the mill site, and some historical tours, and Rocky Smith's ghost tours as well. And of course, the mayor will speak at the big banquet. So that's all coming up. You'll be hearing more about that, but it's a big event for Oregon City. And someday when we have a hotel here right on site, we can have the whole thing right at the hotel. But at this point, we're kind of like squeezing everybody into certain places, but it's going to work fine. Let's see, I participated in the tourism strategic planning session. I agree with Mr. Gifford here that it was just an amazing experience, and the participation was just outstanding. And also, I continue to do work with the Oregon City Homeless Solutions Coalition, and have been meeting quite regularly with a variety of the different partners. So that's kind of what I've been doing, as well as going to all kinds of things. So anyway, that's it.
Commissioner Mengelberg.
I've been out of town for the month of July, so sorry to miss so many exciting happenings in Oregon City, but it's good to be back. I attended a coordination meeting between the Clackamas County and all of the cities, both staff and electeds, at the county offices a few weeks ago, and I really thought that was a great step in terms of helping us understand the wide variety of services and programs that the county offers, and I think it was very well received. Commissioner Ide and others were there as well, so I thought that was great. That's it.
Okay, all right. So I was a volunteer for the 5K.
Oh.
And I was up on the promenade, and I have to give kudos to the Parks Division there that was spotless up there. But I understand that one of our local residents kind of had to step in there real early in the morning and help out with that. So, and I've expressed my thoughts to her too, that was great of her to do that. But I think that whole thing was just great. You know, everybody had a great time. I think it's bigger and bigger every year. So, been working with the Veterans Housing Project that's going on here that we just spoke of tonight here. Been spending time also on affordable housing solutions, which is kind of part of the Oregon City Housing Solutions Coalitions, is the affordable housing part of that, and working with the county on the Oregon City View Manor project up on Holcomb, which the County Housing Authority owns, and they want to sell that. But we are in the process of trying to convince them that they need to keep some of that available to Oregon cities, because when we did the housing count, come to find out, Oregon City has the largest number of homeless folks. And the highest sector of that is women and children. And the second one is people with jobs without homes. So you would think that we could, and then the other sector is the mental folks. So you would think with housing, we could take care of a large part of our homeless folks, you know, in the future, not immediately, because we need to do some building stuff. But the idea is to make sure that the county does not take all of that and take it right out of the county seat where all the services are and put that money someplace else. We want to make sure we still have a say in some having affordable housing here. Yeah, we also understand they need the revenue for selling some of the site to maintain some of their other projects they have. So I did get to attend as a spectator, Miss Judge McNeese's court facility up there. Well, she got to see her in action as Commissioner Hyde did at one time, and that's a well-oiled machine there. So that's that's a great asset for Oregon City there. And have to give kudos to the Optimists for cleaning up the Tots Park here last week, I believe it was, last Tuesday, and they spent, I think, a couple hours there, and our neighbor there, Eddie Alec, provided the donuts and everything. So we have a nice relationship going with the Tots Park over here and stuff. So, and then also did attend that Kenema Trail. I can't remember the name of that whole thing.
McLaughlin, the Kenema Trail.
McLaughlin Kenema Trail.
For a day.
Yes, for a day. And finally got to visit the old Kenema Park. Heard a lot about it before and got to finally visit it. It gave me a good excuse to go visit the trail. And we have kind of a hidden asset right there ourselves, right there. So that was great. And watching the Oregon City Parks Foundation doing their work in there, pulling ivy, and watching Mr. Gifford amongst the trees and ivy there and stuff, so that was great. I do want to remind you that tomorrow night is another concert in the park featuring Ray Gordon, and the Optimists will be providing food for that. And then, of course, next week is the last concert, and that's the Volunteers Appreciation Dinner. And that will be Johnny Limbo and the Lugnuts. Food by the Optimists again. So I encourage everybody to come and see that. Okay? That's it. All right. Anything else? Oh.
Clackamas County Fair started yesterday.
Yes. The fair started. Don't plan on going on Sunday because they don't have the fair on Sunday now. So.
But go get a Prano pup from the Optimist Club.
Yes.
We sold almost 400 today.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Oh. All right. So anything else? Good. We're adjourned.
Okay.